sponsoring and wider network of organizations supporting this event. Indeed, welcome the continued attention of the Human Rights Council to the development of a human rights-based approach to preventable maternal mortality and morbidity. We recognize the important leadership of the co-sponsoring states and agencies present, as demonstrated throughout this side event. As today's panel has already heard, understanding and acceptance of the human rights-based approach has developed and consolidated significantly since the Council's first resolution in 2009. Nevertheless, just in 2009, the Human Rights Council recognized its role in, quote-unquote, adding value to the work happening across the UN system on this issue. But today, its work is equally important. The HCHR report on good and effective practices announced by the High Commissioner to be presented tomorrow shows that in many places, well-intentioned and often innovative approaches to reducing maternal mortality and morbidity resonate with many of the key principles of the human rights approach. We welcome the contribution of this report to identifying these practices. Yet, at the same time, the report sheds light on the fact that the practical application of these essential principles that have been mentioned today, accountability, participation, transparency, empowerment, sustainability, international cooperation, and non-discrimination, is patchy, inadequate, and sometimes even accidental. It is for this reason that today, civil society organizations reiterate the importance of the Council's role in championing the human rights-based approach. An important task still remains: systematic implementation of the human rights-based approach through policies and programs aimed at eliminating preventable maternal mortality. The Council's work so far has recognized that participation and empowerment are essential, as this panel again has emphasized. A recent public inquiry established in Kenya, for example, by the National Commission on Human Rights, is actually examining the country's legal framework for implementing reproductive rights and identifying and documenting cases where discrimination is a barrier to the exercise of these rights. The Commission has identified the importance of stakeholder participation in this process as crucial to its success. Discrimination also constitutes a barrier for many women seeking maternal health services and puts poor, rural, or indigenous women at significant disadvantage. As the High Commissioner actually reminded us, this obligation, the obligation of non-discrimination, is not subject to progressive realization. An example is a recent decision from the CEDAW committee this year. The case of Alina da Silva Pimentel was a stark reminder of the common failure of health services around the world to provide basic care to women with complications during pregnancy. Aline, an Afro-Brazilian woman, died in 2002 after a series of failures in seeking emergency obstetric care, and her family are still waiting for justice. The decision of the CEDAW committee on this case is a significant precedent for the human rights-based approach. It is the first time, long overdue, that the UN Human Rights Mechanism applies itself to a case of an individual victim and her family, reminding us of the tangible and real relevance of the human rights principles that we are discussing today to the lives of individual women and their families. International cooperation is essential to ensuring that health systems and related services are resourced efficiently. Donors must also take a human rights approach, ensuring consistency of their policies with human rights norms. And finally, accountability. By its very nature, accountability must be a constructive process. It addresses past grievances and corrects systemic failure to prevent future violations. As Dr. Lucero said, monitor, review, and act. This framework in the Commission on Information and Accountability's final report is a perfect example of this. Accountability allows governments to demonstrate to its citizens that it is what it's doing to implement their human rights. The example I gave on the Kenya Human Rights Commission inquiry is an important example of constructive accountability processes. Our organizations acknowledge that implementation of these principles is not necessarily a straightforward task. It is for this reason that we are calling for an expert panel, as called for in the resolution, to be convened to prepare an operational guidance on the implementation of the human rights-based approach to maternal mortality and morbidity, related specifically to policies and programs. In some instances, we envisage that operational guidance will allow states to recognize the potential of existing mechanisms, such as it was mentioned, national human rights institutions to address maternal mortality and morbidity, urging that they be adequately resourced and empowered to fulfill their function. In other instances, this guidance will allow states to identify new practical tools and approaches to implement within their policies and programs. Implementing the human rights approach requires actions to be taken within a country's health system, but also beyond. Eliminating preventable maternal mortality and morbidity requires that measures be taken to address all of its root causes: discrimination, socioeconomic disparities, lack of access to information, education, or nutrition, as it was also mentioned. Important developments must be recognized, and we welcome, again, the commitment of WHO to ensuring that human rights-based approach is central to efforts to follow up states' implementation of the recommendations of the Commission on Information and Accountability. We share the interest in making the guidance developed applicable and relevant to the work of the Commission. And we also agree and join the Vice President of Colombia on the importance of the operational guidance to the work of a number of actors, whether it's the governments, whether it's donors, whether it's UN agencies, even the human rights bodies and organizations like us, in our efforts toward eliminating preventable maternal mortality and morbidity. For this reason, we urge you the importance that the Council ensure that the scope of its resolution allow for the guidance to be the widest possible reference. The few encouraging examples that we have of the application of the human rights-based approach, such as those that are set up in the report, demonstrate why operational guidance is so necessary. These examples show that implementing the human rights-based approach is a real possibility, with real benefits. Ensuring the applicability of the guidance developed under the auspices of the Council to all actors engaged in eliminating maternal mortality will ensure that the Council's stamp continues to be firmly marked on future